listening to the Esq.Marketing podcast, hosted by Matthew Lauren, president of Esq.Marketing, where he features successful solo and SMB law firms from all over the United States. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey, I'm Matthew Lauren, president of Esq.Marketing, and you're listening to the Esq.Marketing podcast, where I feature successful lawyers from all over the United States. This episode is brought to you by Esq.Marketing. We help law firms generate more clients and cases using affordable and practical digital marketing strategies. And speaking of successful lawyers, today I have the pleasure of speaking with Jim Owen. Jim is founder of Koenig Owen, a criminal defense law firm based in Columbus, Ohio. For more than a quarter century, Jim has been involved in numerous criminal defense cases and is credited with winning Ohio's first death penalty acquittal after executions were reinstated. He's represented judges, congressmen, professional athletes, rappers, and has an impressive record winning acquittals in felony jury trials. Jim, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Matt.
That's pretty cool. So you've represented rappers, huh? Was there any well-known rappers that you've represented?
Well, I currently represent a rapper who's in Columbus, Ohio, who's accused of participating in a criminal gang. He currently has a pretty big recording contract with some big names in music.
That's super interesting. I got to admit, the first time I met you and some of the things you were telling me about the people you've represented, that's you're definitely one of the more interesting attorneys we've had on the show.
We represent anyone from homeless people to I was legal advisor to Ohio's Secretary of State in 16 federal lawsuits. I've represented a congressman, judges, a lot of different people.
That's very cool. Very cool. So Jim, take me back to the beginning when you started your law firm. What was that like for you?
Well, I started in a relatively mid-sized law firm and was very unsatisfied representing banks and insurance companies, and had a hard time just getting any sustenance or even focusing enough to do the work and do it well. And I was appointed to a criminal case by a judge I knew and was shocked initially about how unfair the system is, how you get very little discovery. I could get sued by a department store and get all the discovery I want and get charged for murder, and I don't get anything, particularly back then. And I was just really, really stunned, kind of fell in love with it. We had no rules back when I started about who could represent and be appointed to represent an indigent person, even in a murder case or a death penalty case. So in 1985, a judge appointed me to represent a really famous person who was accused of killing a prominent Columbus business person and political figure who was a candidate for city council at the time and on our transit authority. And some of the legal community was pretty outraged because it was I only had 2 jury trials in criminal cases under my belt, very little experience, and I was scared to death. And I went out, did a neighborhood canvass, and found some great witnesses that gave descriptions of the shooter that was very different than mine. Got a great alibi, had a jury trial. The jury was out 4 days, and it came back with a not guilty verdict as to all counts. That was in 1986. The jury started January 9th, my birthday. I remember that forever. And it really gave me the bug. I should have never taken the appointment. It was outrageous that I was appointed in the first place, and it could have turned out very, very badly for the client.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I was so petrified that I worked my tail off day and night for months before the case went to trial. And that really started my career. I'd been a lawyer for 7 years then. I'd only been doing criminal defense for about 18 months. And so I got some recognition tried a number of death penalty murder cases after that. My clients were really lucky. I got several other acquittals, complete acquittals. I mean, most people in a death case rightfully view it as a win if their client escapes the death penalty.
Yeah.
But we just litigated the heck out of the cases, and I was very lucky. So homicides kind of became the foundation of my small law firm.
Okay. And you went into private practice kind of right after that time. And
Well, I graduated from law school in 1979. I worked at a major law firm till 1983 for 4 years and became dissatisfied with representing the banks and insurance companies. Left in 83, then got appointed to a criminal case in 84. And really from 1984 to the present, all I've done is either criminal defense, or I also have civil rights litigation arising out of people who've been wrongly convicted.
Okay. That makes sense.
The premier case, I represented two guys named Timothy Howard and Gary James, and they were tried, convicted, and sentenced to death in 1977 for robbing a bank in Columbus, Ohio, and killing the security guard.
Really?
I got involved 20 years later. This amazing man named James McCloskey, who's an ordained minister out of Princeton, New Jersey, and ran an organization called Centurion Ministries, came to visit me and sought my help in representing these two guys that he believed were innocent. That was 20 years later in 1997, after all their appeals were exhausted. Jim and I spent 4 years, pretty much every weekend, re-interviewing all the witnesses. I think proved them innocent beyond all doubt. On a successor post-conviction motion, had a week-long hearing. The judge found that the government cheated to get their conviction, found by clear and convincing evidence that they were innocent, and granted them new trials.
Nice.
The government threw in the trial, but later we had a civil murder trial. We sued the state, and we had a jury find factual innocence. And we had an 8-member jury. They voted 6-2 to find them factually innocent by the greater weight of the evidence.
That is very cool. So it seems like you got a lot of notoriety early on. And how were you able to parlay that into, getting more of that type of business?
Well, I really didn't. I'm a failure as a businessman, at least until recently, because I view our track record in trial cases second to none, if not in Columbus, in the state, maybe in the Midwest. I mean, we have a profile of acquittals and serious felony cases and big name cases that I think is really unparalleled. And so the question becomes, how do you convert that to dollars and cents? It seems like the people that really win are the people that focus on adding interesting content to their website, build links, get other people to nominate them for awards, and they sit and meet at a coffee shop and nominate each other for this award or that award or the other award. And people that are really trying to focus on building a portfolio of big wins tend not to value that as much as maybe they should if they wanted to support their family the way their families deserve it. I mean, my wife says, hey, when my husband's in trial, the whole family's in trial. They suffer because you're focused on your craft. And so your family deserves better. And if you're really smart, you would think and try to, if you can't do it yourself, get the right team.
Yeah, you raise a good point there, because there's like focusing on your craft, and then there's the whole actually practicing law, and then there's the promotion of it, right? And and you don't always have time for both. That's totally true. What is, I was reading some of the cases that you had on your site. What's the craziest one you've ever had? I was just curious.
Well, I've had a lot of crazy cases, but that first murder case I had, my client actually in the first trial tried to escape.
I read that.
Almost gunned down as he reached the elevator. We had this old deputy sheriff named Rufus who probably couldn't hit the side of a barn at 15 feet with his gun, and he was holding it at my client by the elevator and said, "Stop or I'll shoot." And I ducked even though I was the other direction. And so he was in we had a mistrial. He was retried. He was in shackles the whole time, the retrial. So that was kind of crazy.
Yeah, super crazy, I would say.
The most memorable case I had, I lost. And some people would view it as a win. It was a death penalty murder case. My client was sentenced to life, but he shot a person during a robbery with a sawed-off shotgun. And I tried that co-counsel with our current prosecuting attorney, Gary Tyak. I tried that in 1988. And we had an expert that showed that the gun could fire without touching, let alone pulling the trigger.
Wow.
And so we put our expert on, and the theory was that the gun went off accidentally. And we didn't have felony murder in Ohio then. It could only be purposely causing the death of another. It happened during a felony. It was involuntary manslaughter. So our defense was involuntary manslaughter. The gun went off by accident. And we had our expert, who was a gun expert from Southern Ohio, and had it off there. And I said, "Can this gun fire?" And it had exposed hammers without pulling the trigger. And he said yes. And I had put blank shotgun shells in the gun. And I told the judge, but he must not have understood. So he's maneuvering the gun, and all of a sudden, pow! And everyone
in the courtroom
dives for the table. The judge is going crazy. The jury's dive. And I can't understand why the judge is so unbelievably upset. And he calls us up, and Gary Tyak's there with me, and he says, "Well, didn't Jim tell you that the gun was loaded?" And so I didn't know. I had blanks. I didn't know you had primers in those shotgun shells. So we had a long recess, and actually, it's funny you ask. Our client's name is Michael Patterson. He called me yesterday from prison. He has 12 more years before his first parole hearing. He has an exemplary record. And I remember during preparing for mitigation or sentencing, I remember talking to his younger brother, who grew up in the slums of Columbus, a place called Windsor Terrace. His name was Carlos. Carlos had two older sisters, both of whom had given birth before they turned 16. His oldest brother had died when he was shot while trying to rob a convenience store. His other brother was on trial for his life. His mother was dying of cancer, and his father had abandoned him when he was born. And I remember talking to him. He'd never met anyone who had a job. And I remember thinking about, what can society expect to happen to Carlos? Will Carlos end up like Michael?
Yeah.
I've tried to keep in touch, and he's doing okay. Doesn't have a criminal record, is employed. And it's just kind of something that will stick with me forever. not just the gun going off in the courtroom, but the family and what it's like for people. I mean, I feel many times I've had every opportunity known to man and taken advantage of none, and other people have had virtually no opportunity, and some of them succeed, and you wonder why. I assume it's because there was some grandparent somewhere or some relative that showed him a lot of love. And but anyway,
that's unfortunate. And I hear you too. Yeah, I mean, you see the people that commit these crimes, or you hear about it, and you think, oh man, but you don't really think about the environment that created them. So I noticed you had a ton of passion for representing indigent folks, and obviously some of the families of those people. Was that a major driver for you to get into private practice and focus on criminal defense?
It was, because I couldn't. It was before the internet, and you were prohibited from soliciting business, and it was
right.
The only way to earn a living when I first got started. After I quit doing appointed cases, I got my sustenance from representing people who I believe were convicted and innocent. And we've represented a number of people in post-conviction hearings and federal habeas and before the parole board, who we believe are innocent and mistakenly were convicted.
And that's sort of like the organization I've heard about is the Innocence Project.
Yeah, and I'm working on a case now with a branch of the Innocence Project that operates out of the University of Cincinnati Law School, Cincinnati,
that's awesome.
Ohio. And we have a case that's going to a motion for a new trial based on newly discovered evidence, and then we have an evidentiary hearing at the end of March. So,
I love those stories, and I mean, I cringe hearing about it because I just don't want to. It sucks that people have to be wrongly convicted like that, but it's neat to hear about organizations like that and people like you who've worked really hard to, open up some hope for people that are wrongly convicted. That's really cool. So a lot of our listeners are attorneys like yourself who may be working for another law firm and thinking about going off on their own. What's something you wish you did in the beginning when you started your private practice that you didn't do?
Well, I wish I would have systematized the defense of criminal practice. I mean, right now we have about a 10-page felony case checklist that we go through to make sure that we don't miss anything. Are there any motions we should have been filing? I mean, on occasion, I have a case and I realize, wow, I should have filed a motion to sever, or I didn't think about suppression with this piece of evidence, or I didn't think about something. And or maybe there was an expert witness I wish I would have retained earlier. And so we now have a pretty comprehensive 10-page checklist that my paralegal goes through when we get a case. And it starts with the basics, with a client interview, and checks for problems early on. And we also have a checklist for analyzing discovery so that my time can be better used in focusing what's important and discovery matters.
Yeah, that is super cool. I know, I mean, the average person probably wouldn't think much of that, but I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Checklist Manifesto.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah, we do that in our work, and I've heard of other people doing that. But you're the first attorney I've heard, and there may be other people that do it, but you're the first attorney I've heard talk about doing a checklist like that, which is super cool because you can, you not only streamline everything, but then it makes your service much more.
We have in Ohio, under our criminal rules, we have a deadline for filing pretrial motions of 35 days after arraignment. And some counties enforce that very strictly, unless you file a motion before then explaining why you need more time. So, and the county I primarily practice in routinely doesn't enforce it unless you really wait till the last minute. But we found it really important to have a checklist and identify potential problems as early as possible.
Yeah, that's really smart. Sorry, go ahead.
The other thing is, I don't think I really understood what attributes you had to have to succeed to win guilty verdicts. So my whole view is that if you're a client and you want to hire a lawyer, the litmus test should be, have they won cases? Have they won jury trials? Have they come out with acquittals? Because if your lawyer hasn't, how is he going to negotiate a good result even if you don't go to trial? The prosecutor knows you're not going to try the case. What leverage do you have? And so what do you need to get those acquittals? And I don't think when I started, I even really understood what they were. And
that's great advice, not only for attorneys, but for people who are looking to hire attorneys, because I think a lot of people, no matter what lawyer they're talking to, they just assume that an attorney is professional and good at their job and knows what to do, like a doctor or a dentist or whatever, but they have no idea that there's a spectrum of skill.
Right. So, obviously, I thought, well, you've just got to be knowledgeable and thorough. And if you're knowledgeable and thorough, everything will come together. And certainly, you do have to have a knowledge base. You have to know the elements of every crime that your client's charged with. You need to know common defenses. You need to know the people in the courthouse, the judges, the prosecutors. There's a lot of things you need to know. You need to develop a great knowledge base, and that can be a foundation. So that's kind of the first attribute I think about is the knowledge base. The second thing are skills. You've got to have skill in selecting a jury and cross-examining witnesses and putting your own client on and how to do it in a persuasive way. You've got to have skills in closing argument. There's a whole host of skills in drafting pretrial motions and jury instructions. And jury instructions kind of go with the knowledge base. And so that's the second element I think about are those skills. But the third thing is talent. A lawyer's got to be a talented storyteller. You have to have a theory of innocence and really do a good job, a talented job of letting the jury know what the case is. And you need to believe in your case. People say, do you believe in your client? I never believe or disbelieve my client or in his client. But I'll tell you one thing, I sure as hell believe in my case. I have a theory of innocence. I believe in that case with my heart and soul. And the jury, from the time we go through jury selection through closing argument, sees the passion about that case. I may not be slick, may not be shrewd, but they see the passion I have about my belief in my case. And that's where the talent comes in. It's different than skill. Talent's a different concept than is skill or our skill.
Those skills that you mentioned, is that something that they teach you in law school, or is that something that attorneys have to seek out afterwards?
No, you pretty much have to seek it out. I mean, my weak point has always been probably cross-examination, and I had to learn that. There's a guy out there named Terry McCarthy, who I think is a retired federal public defender, who's written one book on cross-examination, another one on impeachment. There are other people but I swear by Terry McCarthy, and he has 13 techniques of cross-examination, and I take every witness and look at them and try to evaluate what works and what doesn't work.
That's very interesting. So, and do you work on those skills on a continuous basis, like always trying to hone them and get better?
Not as much as I wish I would, but I think the better lawyers do. We have a great lawyer in Columbus that I refer a lot of drunk driving cases too, who's constantly working on honing his skills. It's amazing.
Nice. So if what is a book that, someone new to private practice or just thinking about going off on their own, what's a book that you would recommend they read? Any business books or books related to the skills that you just talked about?
I don't know. I would just go to as many CLAs. I mean, I'm a believer in Terry McCarthy.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and let me talk about the last element that I think you need to have to be you got to have guts, because I had someone tell me once, ask me what the difference between a litigator and a criminal trial lawyer was, and I didn't know. And he said a litigator is always prepared but never ready, and criminal defense lawyers are too often ready but never prepared. So hopefully you want to be both. You want to be prepared, which goes to those elements I talked about, and ready. And be ready really takes guts, man. You got to be ready, willing, and able to take it to the box, to the jury.
Yeah,
that takes a lot of guts. And I don't know that you need to be a junkyard dog, but man, you got to have enough confidence to get up there and try your case.
I can't even imagine. That's all great advice, Jim. You've been listening to Jim Owen, founder of Koenig and Owen. Jim, where could people go to learn more about the firm?
Well, it's you can just Google Koenig and Owen.
Koenig, I'm sorry, mispronounced that.
That's okay. Or it's ColumbusCriminalDefenseAttorney.com, which is too long of a URL. But I got it decades ago when having keywords in your URL mattered. So ColumbusCriminalDefenseAttorney.com, and our phone number's there. And I'm willing to help anyone, however I can.
That's awesome, Jim. I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show.
And I would encourage everyone to focus on the business aspects more than perhaps I did, and then determining how they're going to get their clients and what kind of client they want and what they need to do to have a successful business.
Great advice.
Thanks for listening to the Esq.Marketing Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.